Okay, so I'm in Portugal. This is the place that we're staying. We are in Cascais. This is just a view of our hotel, or like the place we're staying. And what do I have to tell you? We have had a lot of wine and a lot of very, very mixed wine experiences. And I have learned a lot, but one thing, I think the first thing I'll say is a very, very interesting thing, which is that the wine in the south, in the Algarve, which is where all the British are, it's way better than in the Cascais Lisbon area. I'm sure in Lisbon, we're not staying in Lisbon proper, there's better wine. But this is really known as like the Riviera of Portugal, Cascais. And the wine is not, the wine lists are absolutely horrible almost everywhere you go. And we're going back. We went to Lisbon on Wednesday, and then we're going back again on tomorrow before we go home. And I'm hoping to find some better wine. But the wine in Cascais is dreadful. Like, it's horrible. And even the wine shop in Lisbon that we went to had bad wine. So I don't know what's going on, but what I have heard from a few people is that Portuguese people will not spend more than 10 euro on wine. So the best wines actually wind up in the UK and in the US. So we may be getting the best of what they have available. I'm going to make a post. I've already started it. I didn't get to finish it. I went to Colares, which is, or Collage, I guess they call it, which is one of the it's a really old region. And the reason is that it has sandy soils. It's right on the coast. So it was not hit by phylloxera at all. And it has really, really great wine, actually. So the whites are mostly Malvasia, and the reds are a grape called Ramisco, which you won't really find anywhere else. We bought a whole bunch of wine there, but I think in total they have 24 hectares, which is like 60 acres of vines. That's it. So that's right outside of Lisbon. There's a couple of other regions that are right outside of Lisbon also, which are, they're supposed to be fine, but they've mainly been crowded out by the suburbs. And I've had a couple from the peninsula that's across from Lisbon, which is Setúbal is what they call it. And those are very good whites, actually, but the reds are not good. And in Algarve, I was really, really surprised. All the local wines were terrible, but not only were they pretty bad, they also, if you want to go to winery, it was 43 euro, which, Louisa, I don't know what it is in pounds, but in dollars, that's like almost $50 a tasting for bad wine. Huh. So I wasn't going to do that. But the wine in Algarve, what I will say is that they had like a couple of the wine bars that we went to there, awesome wines. Like things like small producers from the Dow and the Douro and really, really good stuff. And here it's been really disappointing. So today, the other update I have is today, we just came back from Alentejo, which is most of the winemaking in Portugal most of the wine is made in the Alentejo region. So we visited two of the top producers. One, they've got a tasting room in the town of Évora, which if you ever come here, you should absolutely go to because it is stunning. I'll post pictures on Patreon. But we went to Cartuja, which is a really famous winery, and we just went to their tasting room. We tasted their highest end white. Their highest end red was like 335 euro a bottle, so we weren't going to taste that. The highest end white was like 16 euro a glass, so we had one glass and shared it. And It was Arinto and Antauvash, which is those are like, common native grapes. So much oak. It tasted like a California Chardonnay. And it is super expensive. And the guy poured us that, and then he poured us like a red that was super expensive also, the Cartuja red, which was a lot of Alicante Boucher, and I think there was some Petit Verdot in it. And then he poured us the white, which is what he says like the locals drink. And it was about 10 times less and 10 times better. Right? So like, I think he said it was like 10 euro. And the other one, the white was, I think, maybe it was 7 times. It was like 80 euro, and it was gross. So really, really interesting is what they think is going to like make people really excited is the wines that are very expensive, heavily oak aged, and completely out of, I think what we would find interesting. So I had a conversation with that guy about that, but he's not the winemaker who's just, working at the wine bar. And then we went to another winery. Let me look at the name really quickly because I already forgot, but it was such a great experience. It was called Vita. Hold on a second. Vita Preta. And it's a fairly new place. And all of their wines were awesome. And they were all like native grapes, native regions. So they're making like a dry wine from a really old grape in Madeira. I don't have my phone with me, but I took a picture of it. I don't even remember it. It was like a grape I've never even heard of. They set up something in Alentejo, which is where the winemaker is from. They set up something in the Douro. They have a bunch of different wineries, and they're dealing with all of these interesting grapes I've never had before. Alicante, like, what was it? It was like an Alicante Blanc, right? So there's Alicante Boucher, which is a red wine. This is some sort of white Alicante blend. It was one of the most delicious things I've ever had. I was not planning on buying wine there because I'd already bought a bunch of wine in Colares, which for those of you who like really minerally wines, the wines from Colares are awesome. But like I said, they barely make any wine. So it's kind of hard to get that wine. But these were insane. This is a bottle. So they make in Colares, they make 2 wines. One is from purely sandy soils. This is the co-op, which makes over 50% of the wines. And another is from the clay soils, and this is just Lisboa, which is the Vinho Regional. So if you ever see this, really great wine. Ramisco and what else is it? Hard soil. That's clay. Hold on a second. What is it? They don't have the blend, but I think it's Castelao, Ramisco, and I think there's some Alicante Boucher in that, but it's really fantastic reds and whites from that small producer. But again, really small production. Alentejo. So I will tell you that I went to the Rota dos Vinos de Alentejo, which is like the wine, they've got a wine road, a place set up in Évora. It's the beginning of like where you would go in Alentejo. And I said to the guy, okay, look, just level with me. Like, where are the good places here? Because I've got an appointment at Vita Preta. I'm thinking about Cartuja. I've got a couple of others. He was like, pretty much you checked off the list. He gave me a list. I will write them down in the Patreon. I'll write them down in Patreon for you. 5 places he recommended in all of Alentejo. That's kind of not great. Like, you know what I mean? Like, he was being honest with me. And so we had one at lunch. And then we went to 2 of the wineries. So it's a little bit, I I would say like Alentejo is, I had a really different impression of it because I've had a lot of Ramos, who's a very big producer. I've had some Jose Souza, which is pretty good, but I would say it's still really a work in progress, which is kind of interesting. And the best wines we've had have been from Dow. The second best have been from Douro, but we've also had some really bad wines from Dow and Douro. So I don't know. Still a work in progress. Do you guys have any questions? That's kind of my update on where we are with this trip. I mean, it's absolutely beautiful. It's so amazing here, but I would say the wine scene is iffy. It's not 100% here. It's not like when you go to France and you're pretty sure that, or Italy, where you're pretty sure you can get a great wine. I mean, I can assure you that if you go somewhere in Tuscany, you're going to get a great wine. I mean, if you just have to like a tiny bit of something and you're going to get a great wine. Campania, the same thing. You're going to find the same thing in Piedmont. You're going to find the same thing in Veneto. You'll find anywhere. But here, it's not quite like that. So interesting. And I think that my impression was that it had come a little bit farther than it has. Or what questions do you all have? None? Any questions about Portugal in general? I can't say I'm a specialist.
Hi, Elizabeth.
Hi.
Hi. What about the Vino Verde?
Best wine I've had here. So I'm incredibly fortunate, Louisa, in that I have already been to, I went to the on that, it was a horrible trip, right? Because like I was with these people who were way younger than I was, who were not very serious journalists. It was a terrible trip. However, I realized now that I'm here, I got a lot more out of it than I thought I had, right? Like my memory of it is, bad personalities, but actually when the most reliable wines that we've had have been Vinho Verde. And it's mostly because I know which producers. The one thing I will tell you that I think is pretty fascinating, so I'm really glad you asked this question, is that you will not find, I think at all, you will not find Vinho Verde that is not varietally labeled here. All of it is labeled by variety.
That's really interesting because I'm drinking a little wines, European supermarket. It's very delicious and it's only Avesso.
Avesso is delicious.
Avesso, sorry.
Avesso is creamy and delicious. Good for you for finding that. It is hard to find. And yes, that's one of their best grapes by far, in my opinion.
Good. Like it.
Do you like it?
It's delicious. And it's about £8, £7.50. It's not expensive.
Which is expensive for Portuguese wine. So, I mean, like I said, the Portuguese themselves will not, that's a Ramos that I'm drinking now. It's just a Douro wine from I think it's João Ramos. I would say that by far the most consistent wines we've been able to find are especially Alvarinho from Vinho Verde. Because you almost can't go wrong. I mean, it's basically like Rias Baixas. Like, where are you going to get a bad Alvarinho from Rias Baixas? It's pretty hard to do. Same thing with Alvarinho. Alvarinho is only grown in Mansão and Mangasão, this little region that's right on the border with Spain. So, yeah, I would say Vinho Verde is highly successful. And the most successful region, we have found the most consistent region we found, which is pretty surprising because I thought Douro had come a lot farther. But that said, the highest high has by far been Dow. By far, like by 1.5 miles. Like the Encruzado, we have an aged Encruzado, the best white we've had here, and we had a red Dow, which was the best red. I'll do like a post of the best that we've had here, but it's a short list. I mean, a lot of the stuff, like we just order stuff off the menu and it's like, it's supposed to be good and it's not that great. So it's kind of disappointing. Mary Jo said we did a wine tasting of Portuguese wines at a local shop last week. Vinho Verde won. Yeah. Michele. Hi, Michele. It's nice to see you here. I've explored more Portuguese wine in the UK. I haven't found a single bad wine yet. So this is really what's interesting, is that I think the importers have their pick of the litter. They're really picking, like, what's the best thing that we can get? And we can get so much stuff. So because we can get everything, like, what's the best stuff we can get? And that's what they're bringing. And I think that they're leaving behind a lot of mess stuff. And I think that they're not importing, even if the Portuguese consider them to be the top wines. I'm not sure that importers are like, yeah, we want another wine that tastes like a Chardonnay from California. Like, no one wants
It's
that
impressive
from
as well, the
Portugal.
quality that comes with it. Because, like, for example, here I can find, like, wines for £6, £7 that taste so great. And
Right.
yeah, like, find that so cheap in England, to be honest. It's quite rare for that price. I mean, because usually you can find, like, maybe, I don't know, a Pinot Grigio for like £3, £4 that, and I'm not even gonna try because, like, to be honest, I don't think it would be great. For
No.
a £6, £7, you still get a great thing, I would say. Yeah.
Yes, and you're benefiting from it, and so are we in the US, which is that, they have already weeded through all of the stuff. The UK importers, the people of the direct importing from Portugal, are saying, no, like, if you're not that good, we're not going to take that. So they're bargaining both on price and on quality, and they're looking for the best thing that they can get, and they're succeeding. And I would say that in the US, we're in much the same boat. It's hard to get really bad Portuguese wine, and our pricing is the same as yours. We're looking at 7 or 8 or 10 US dollars for really good wine, which is, it's a shame for Portugal, right? It's a shame for them. Their standard of living is quite high. Their cost of living is pretty low. But one thing we've heard consistently here is that inflation has been an enormous problem, as it has been, I know, all over Europe. And they are having a very difficult time because the cost of goods versus their salaries is incredibly inconsistent. Now, Michele, this is an enormous problem in Italy right now, especially in the small towns. And I don't know what the resolution is to it. It's much worse here than it is in the US, for instance. And I'm not sure how they're going to fix it. But as that happens, I think the producers are pressed here to make better wines for less money. And then when they go to the market, and I hate saying this, but it's true, the Italians have figured out that you do a huge markup, right? Like, you're not going to sell a Chianti Classico for €7. Like, you're not going to do that. Here,
Or an Amarone.
yeah, they're not doing that. They have not figured out that you've got to sell it for more money in order to get the return. Now, I think the only place that I've seen that is in the tasting fees, where I actually think it's a good idea. I think it's a great idea for them to charge high tasting fees, because they are there. A lot of people don't buy wine. I think they probably haven't quite caught up with the idea that if you pay a high tasting fee and then you buy wine, you probably should get a discount off of the bottles. But today was very, very kind. Like, I sent her, I sent the winery some information about what I do, and they looked me up and they did not charge us, but we bought a ton of wine from them, like, it was great. I don't even know how I'm going to get that wine home, but I will figure it out. Yeah, but it's different. I mean, it's a really different situation. And I do wonder if, the other thing I figured out, or I understand now, they would rather speak English here than Spanish, just as an FYI. I'm sure that people who have traveled here might know that. They hate the Spanish so much here that they do not, even if they will understand your Spanish better than your English, they would rather speak English to you. That's fascinating. They hate.
I think it's a matter of pride at that point, yeah, because they always like assume that they get associated with like, oh, you're basically like Spanish kind of thing. So yeah, I understand. Yeah.
It's horrible. Now, have you been to Portugal, Michele?
No, but I have lived in Spain, and I've worked as well with Portuguese people, and I know that they have this sort of like feeling that they hate to be like kind of blend in with the Spaniards, like to say like, oh, it's like Spanish but similar, but they are really proud of their heritage and they're really proud to be Portuguese and to speak something that it's not Spanish. So
Right.
yeah.
And they purposely try not to speak Spanish with you. Now, my question to you though is, when you speak Italian, are they equally offended or is it better? Probably better.
No, they're all right with it. Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't think that they have that sort of like resentment towards us, as well, in my experience at least.
No, I don't
what
think so.
noticed,
Hey,
no,
you know
what I
what? There's a
noticed though is
ton of
that-
Italians here. So I
All
spoke
right, I didn't
more
know.
Italian. I have to tell you, I've spoken more Italian here than I did in Italy.
Wow, it's amazing. I didn't know that. Like, because the thing that I find weird with Portuguese, when it's written, I can understand it. When it's spoken, I'm sorry, but it's just like I can't keep up. And yet I speak Italian and Spanish, so I should be able to figure it out. But no, it doesn't happen.
I think, well, okay, the Portuguese have said a couple of things. First of all, that Brazilian Portuguese is easier for people to understand. And Portuguese is an incredibly difficult language. And Spanish and Italian, as you know, are basically the same language with just a few different vocabulary. Like there's a little bit of vocabulary change and the accents are different. That's basically it. Spanish is easier than Italian, but so for you, Spanish should be very, very easy to learn because it's basically the same language. But Portuguese, you would think it's the same as Spanish, but it's completely different, right?
Elizabeth.
Yeah, I do speak. Sorry.
No, go ahead. Finish your thought.
No, it's just like I wanted to say that I do speak both Italian and Spanish, and yeah, there's lots of false friends. That's the thing that usually people do not appreciate properly when they do speak both. But yeah,
yes,
that's what I wanted
but
to say. Yeah.
but you can get by. Well, I'll say that even
Yeah.
though
Oh, yeah.
you might, I
Absolutely.
understand Italian and I speak Spanish and understand Spanish. So, but Italian I can't really speak anymore. But I can speak Spanish to Italian people and they still sort of understand. If I'm in a bind and that person does not speak any English, I can speak Spanish to them and they're good. You know, we can make it work. Yeah.
Yeah.
But not, I could not imagine trying to speak like French or Portuguese to an Italian person, having them understand anything I say. I don't speak those languages though. Let me be clear, as we know. Linda, what did you have to ask?
Yeah. Wondering, it sounds like what you're talking about is in a way they're going through growing pains now, and I'm wondering with and getting bad advice maybe about what the consumer wants, but I'm wondering with climate change, are they going to have time to make, you know what I mean, are they going to run into this dual problem of trying to adjust to climate change and yet they haven't figured out what the market wants completely?
It's a real, okay, first of all, this is what I will tell you. In a place like Alentejo, it's already so hot, right? So this is the thing about like, okay, so Campania, we talk about climate change with, we talked about with Piero Mastrobordino, and I talk about a little bit in the podcast that you'll hear in a couple of weeks with Antonio Cabaldo. And it hasn't changed that much because they're in a very strange area where it's not getting hotter, really. They're having some differences, but really not. Here in Alentejo in the south, it's already so hot. How much hotter are you going to get? It's already so hot. In the north, it's much more of an issue. Okay, and then the north is considered much more premium than the south. So yeah, they're going to hit an issue, but the north is already sort of figured out, right? Like if you get the wines of the Dow, I mean, I will tell you, we had a wine from the Dow, which I think I posted, that tastes just like Pinot Noir from Burgundy. I could not believe like how similar it was. But the farther south you move, the less, I mean, this is all over the place, right? The farther south you move, the less climate change is affecting people. Sicily doesn't have that problem as much. You know, you're seeing it more. Even Tuscany has some problem with climate change, but it's not as bad as what you see in Piedmont, because Piedmont is much farther north. So there's this dichotomy. Yeah, I think it's an issue into Alentejo, but Alentejo, the other thing about it is, I was asking them, because this is one of the problems I have, like, in the classes, is that I recommend that you guys get Alente, Alentejano or Alentejano versus Alentejo. Alentejo is the DOC. Alentejano is the same exact area, but the DOC, but it's the IPR, the you know, the regional wine. And so the problem here is, you know, they're not seeing any really much difference. The difference really here is that they're growing different grapes. They're growing more stuff all over the region. The DOC is restrictive, but here it's still all of this really warm area. The place that's going to have the problem is Douro and Dow, but they've already figured out from a stylistic perspective where they want to be. And a place like Dow is cool. They get a lot of rain. They have marine influence, plus they are in the mountains, and they have a lot of biodiversity. So I think Dow won't have a problem. Douro's another issue. I don't know what Douro's going to do, because they've only just gotten into still red wines, right? Like, I mean, and white wines for that matter, which I've not been impressed by the way. So yeah, I don't know. I don't know what Douro, I don't know what the future is for that, but it's tough. And Vinho Verde is also going to have less issue with climate change, because they have a lot of rain and it's a lot cooler. So again, you know, in the south here, I think it's less of an issue just because it's already so hot. Louisa, you have a question? Yeah.
Have you had some lovely rosés? Because often, again, in supermarkets here in the UK, or even if you go into a more specialist wine shop, they're often plugging the Portuguese rosé.
Oh my God. To a bottle, every rosé we've had here has been awful. Just absolutely disgusting. I mean, you know, I'm going to tell you the truth, even if it's ugly. We have not had, we just gave up. We were trying it because it's hot. It was really, really warm. We were buying it. We were trying it. We tried it from Algarve. We tried it from Alentejo. We tried it from Dow. Every bottle we had was incredibly poorly made, bitter, and imbalanced. And I would drink any swill from Provence over the rosés here any day.
Your friend Liz Gabay, she's not going to be impressed.
I don't know if she has been impressed. I know that she did like the wines of the Douro, but I will tell you, I don't know. She has pretty good taste. She and Ben have pretty good taste, but I thought the rosé here was god awful. I mean, and I love rosé. Like, I really love it. In the right occasion, the right food, it was terrible. I have also been incredibly disappointed by the whites here. And the reason is because a lot of them are made with Orinto, and they are too acidic and they don't have enough flavor for me. Now, some people really like that style, but for me, like, I'll say this, the thing I love about a Muscadet or a Loire white or a Chablis is that it has acidity, and then it also has fruit or mineral or something else. These wines are just pure acid. They're not pretty. They're not interesting. They don't have a lot of depth. And that, to me, is not very attractive at all. The more interesting wines have been some of these lighter reds from the Dow, and actually lighter reds from the Douro too. So I don't know. I mean, I just haven't had a lot of luck with the rosés. So I don't know. I'll have to look into what Liz says or send her a note, but I not impressed. Neil says he has an Albarino from Vinho Regional Minho, which is all, that's basically the entire Vinho Verde region. So Minho is everything that Vinho Verde covers, But if you make Alvarinho outside Monção and Melgaço, which is in the north, you can't call it Alvarinho unless you demote it to IPR. So that's why it's Minho. Pretty good, 12.5%. Yep, that tracks. Michele is saying, I think most Southern European countries see the rosé as an afterthought. Who knows, right? I mean, look, Tavel certainly doesn't look at it as an afterthought. Provence does not look at it as an afterthought. And actually, in your home country, there are some excellent rosés. I mean, just splendid rosés in Italy that I have been blown away by. But I feel like here, yes, they are clearly an afterthought, because what it tastes like is like they're extracting it right to the end, to the point where then they're going to use them for red grapes. They're going to use them for red wines, which is just, I mean, who wants that, right? Any other questions?
Elizabeth, did you try Esperau there in Alentejo?
Let's talk about Esperau.
Okay, that's the only one I think that's the main one I've had. I got it from a tasting, but
Right.
yeah.
So they're huge.
Yeah.
They are about 40 minutes out of Évora, which is where I was today. But we have tried so many of their wines because they're the largest producer, or one of the largest producers. No, are they? They're the largest producer in Alentejo. And I have been unimpressed to a wine with their wines. Very unimpressed. So again, going along this theme of some of the bigger producers are better, Ramos, over and over and over again. João Portugal Ramos, very, very good. I'm not a huge Newport fan, so I don't love all of those wines, but those are okay. But I mean, I have to say that some of those port producers are making some really great wines because they have cash. So they have the right land holdings. Now, Esperau should be doing better than they are, I think, given what you can do here. So I had a wine today, and again, forgive me because I literally just, it starts with a Z. I think it's a Zamojera or something like that. This wine was 16.5% alcohol. Alicante Boucher, Petit Verdot, and Touriga Nacional. And you would never guess that in a million years. Perfectly well balanced, a really excellent wine. Yes, it was very expensive, but it was an excellent, excellent wine. When there's stuff like that being produced in Alentejo, there is no reason for Esperau to be producing and churning out the bulk wine that they are. There's much more potential. And the stuff that I said at the beginning, I mean, the winery that we went to today was just spectacular. All these wines are just fantastic. So the potential is there. Has it been realized? No, not yet in Alentejo. So I don't know where I promise that when I get back, I will start to investigate where we can find some of these wines, because I got to tell you, I've realized that there's this great dichotomy between the best stuff you can get and mass stuff. And we're getting some of the mass stuff. We're not getting anything bad. Trust me, because I've had some bad wines. But there's a difference. There's a big difference. And I think that I've gotten a better handle on that. So I think I think there's definitely we need to sort of make a distinction. Now, it doesn't mean like you're not going to find a nice, cheap and cheerful wine, but I think that to Neil's point and Luisa's point, I mean, it may be that Vinho Verde is the best we can do in terms of very reliable wines over and over and over again. You're always going to find a really reliable Vinho Verde, which is crazy, but I think they're putting the most effort into making these single varietal wines that are way better. So as long as you don't buy the mass produced ones, there's plenty of small producers that make really great wines that are widely available. So that's sort of my feeling. Mary Jo has to log off because she's got a Spanish wine tasting. Woohoo! Fantastic.
I have a
yeah.
So here in southeastern Massachusetts, you think I would be the mecca of every Portuguese wine. This is Claudette. But
I know who you are.
oh, I didn't know if you could see. I thought you shut off our faces or something so we
No.
didn't distract
You shut off your
So-
own face,
yeah, sometimes.
but here you are. Yes.
So
You have a ton. Yes. So one thing I've heard over and over again, Claudette, is, by the way, your hair
Yeah.
looks awesome. One thing I've heard over and over again is, we have a importer in Massachusetts. We don't have an importer anywhere else in the US. We have an importer in Massachusetts.
So I could check out some places for you, but I have to tell you, growing up here, we didn't take wine very seriously because I'm not exaggerating when I say they will give you a bottle at dinner. Like if you
Right.
order meals, you pick a wine, take it. So why would you take that? You want water or you want a bottle of wine? So it almost reminds me of the fiasco straw shab Chianti. You know, it's like, how is
Right.
this going to be seriously? So I didn't drink it all along. And now I guess I've been concentrating on Italian wines, but it was always Vino Verde. Vino Verde. Always.
Yeah.
That's all you'll see anywhere. And now I guess there's a reason for it. Having said that, there's half the population is Portuguese, but it's working class Portuguese too. So maybe
Right. So
that
they're not
$5
gonna pay.
Yeah.
They're not gonna
But
pay
I
more
was
than $10.
I was always afraid it would be like the barefoot of,
It's gonna
Portuguese
be.
wine.
Some
But
of
it's
it is going to be. So
yeah.
what you have to find is you got to find, and again, I don't know, and maybe you and I are going to have to make a trip around there when I come up to Massachusetts to see my
Yeah.
sister. I mean, I think it's really challenging. I do know that some of the best producers have importers in Massachusetts, though. So
Okay.
they have to be somewhere, right? They've got to be somewhere. I don't know where though.
Yeah.
But I know they're coming into the country through Massachusetts because that is the
Okay.
that is the Mecca. You're absolutely right. And so I'm not sure. I mean, so for instance, we had on the show, oh my gosh, the Baird producer. It was Mafalda from, gosh, I can't remember. But in any case, I tried to hook them up with Serge. They were like, well, we already have an importer in Massachusetts who also does some other parts of New England, right? Quinto de Lixo, Lixo, one of the better Vino Verde producers, has an importer in Massachusetts. Like, so they're always looking for more importers, but they're all in Massachusetts because of the strong Portuguese population. So it's kind of interesting. Like, I'm never surprised when people here say, well, we have one importer in the US and it's in Massachusetts. It's in Southern Massachusetts. It's in Boston,
Yeah.
whatever, because it's
And
going right to you.
We're not the ones drinking it, so it must be imported in and sent out.
And Rhode Island also is the
Yeah.
other place, right? So Rhode Island, but I wonder if it's going to restaurants and
Yeah.
not to wine shops, because that's the other thing.
I haven't checked my local wine shops, but I'm just looking at total. If you put in Portugal, they have 197, of which 111 are port. That's what everybody thinks of Portugal.
Right.
Yeah.
Or Vino Verde, right? And I
Vino
say
Verde.
that in the book. Right? Like everyone thinks that it's two things. They've sort of hung their reputation on this. Spain had two things also. They had sherry and they had Rioja. And they
Yeah.
have managed to diversify. They're about 10 years past where Portugal is. They are a much bigger country. They have much more diverse wine. But I do think that Portugal is definitely on the upswing now. So I think that there could be some opportunities. Some of the producers are doing some interesting things. Brian says great selections of Portuguese wines in Chicago. Able to do 3 to 4 Portuguese tastings in the past 6 months across some wine shops. It just depends, right? It just depends on, this is very importer dependent. That's the big problem for Portuguese wines. And there just has to be somebody good who can back it. And some of it is excellent. I mean, yes, those people who know, so the names in Portuguese wines that everyone talks about, Filipa Pata and her father, Luis Pata. Filipa is more prestigious than her father, Luis. Filipa Pata makes wine in the Bairrada region. It is sort of near Douro and Dow. It's a cool wine region. They make a lot of sparkling wine there. So she's doing some very, very interesting things with low intervention wines. So those have been some of the great wines that we've had. There's some excellent producers in the Dow. But again, it's the same names you see over and over again. So Grape, which is the big like co-op that was under Salazar when he was a dictator here. Now they make they make the best white that I've had here, Quinta de Carvalhas, which is here, I'll type it in the chat. But I mean, this is an impossible wine to get. Like Quinta, I think it's Quinta dos Carvalhas. And this was an Encruzado from Dow. It was spectacular. It was really pricey. It's from a bunch of different vintages and from a bunch of different vineyards. So it's like a wine of Portugal because of that. But Quinta dos Carvalhas was the first producer that Grape spun off. I mean, or made or acquired. I'm not sure how they did it, but there was the first high quality one in the Dow. And they've done a lot of great stuff with it. But if you go and look for it, even in wine shops here, you're not going to find it in Portugal, like in Portugal itself. So it's either coming to the US, I don't know, maybe it is, or it's staying in Portugal and going to the Michelin restaurants that are here. But it is really, really interesting. I mean, again, one of these things where it's like, where is all of this great wine going? I mean, Claudette's question is not lost on me, which is that we know, I can tell you that in Algarve, where there are a ton of British, and Luisa can back me up here, and Michele, even though he's Italian, can back me up here, all British people go on vacation in Algarve. Like, basically, it's like British people and like 6 Portuguese and like 3 Americans, right? So because of that, I think they've stepped up their wine game slightly, especially in the wine bars and the restaurants and in some of the wine shops. And all the wine bars sell wine, which is really good because that's where you get the best wine. But it's certainly not available. You got to look for it, like the good stuff. And they are not promoting wines of Algarve because they know that those wines are not good. So I don't know. I don't know why here in this very apparently fancy part of outside of Lisbon, where there are also, by the way, a lot of Brits and Americans and other tourists and people from all over the world. There's tons of French, there's tons of people here, that we don't see better wine. So yeah, this is really something that has stumped me, and I don't know what the answer is. I really don't. And actually, one of your fellow patrons, who is amazing and has set me up with a lot of like new contacts here and friends, she moved here for a little while and then she decided it wasn't for her and moved back to California. But she was saying, she had introduced me to the head of Vinhos de Portugal, right? The head of like the wines of Portugal. And we were supposed to meet this week and it didn't work out. But I have a lot of questions for him. I have a lot of questions for him about why things are the way that they are. And I will ask him those things off the record, but hopefully like we'll be able to do a podcast at some point. But, a lot of times when you get these regional operatives, they're not going to say anything worthwhile. It's really like, especially if they're in charge of the whole country, sometimes the regional people will give you some great information. I thought, one of the most memorable podcasts, if you haven't listened to it, for me, was the guy from the Wines of Alsace, and also the guy who's the head of the Champagne CIVC. So his name was, what was his name? Thibault. I can't remember the guy from Champagne. That was fascinating. But the guy from Alsace, Thierry, oh my gosh, I only remember the first names. He was Thierry Frisch. He was really interesting. And he was full on honest about like their relation with Germany and like the bad history and what's going on with Alsace and whether or not like, you know, climate change is going to be an enormous, I mean, he was completely open about it. And I think that if you got somebody who is like, you know, higher up on the chain in France, they're not going to give you any good information. So I do worry that like I'll ask this guy from the Wines of Portugal some stuff and I'll be like, oh, it's all great, it's fabulous, it's fantastic everywhere, everybody, blah, blah, blah. But it's not true. And we know this. And this is like, I think this is the ultimate head scratcher. We know there's good wine out there. Where is it? Right? I mean, that's besides Algarve. So I think that's really been like my takeaway from the wine portion of my trip. Michele, I don't know. Let me see if you're still with us. You will laugh at this, but I will say, I think I met more Italians in Algarve than Portuguese, and I spoke way more Italian than Spanish, even though my Italian is dicey. And I have to say, the Italians that are living in Portugal are way nicer to me than the Italians in Italy. Because the Italians in Italy are so over Americans at this point, like they're just sick of us, right? You know, and obviously there's been some terrible things that have happened. We did not do the Colosseum thing. Do not blame us. That is not us. But
all right.
And by the way, if anybody wants a really good laugh, this is such a great laugh. Go on CNN.com and look at some of the coverage of the Colosseum incident and look at the comment section. Don't worry about the thing. It's all of these Americans going, oh my God, I was just praying it wasn't an American. I was praying it wasn't an American. Yeah. I called my husband and I was like, thank God it wasn't an American. It's post after post after post. Like, oh my gosh, thank God it's not us. We've already embarrassed ourselves.
I think people have to have more faith in their own country, you know, when people have to have more faith in their own country. But
yeah, I mean, look, America's taken a lot of knocks. And so I think like, again, I'm sorry, Louisa, but we were just really happy that it wasn't us this time because we have done some pretty bad stuff. And this time it was not us. And it was like, whew. Now, granted, the guy actually was not British, I don't think. I think he was from Eastern Europe, but still, you know, I think Italians have had it, as at least as far as I have experienced with Americans. No one will even attempt to speak Italian to me, all of that in any city. But here it was so nice because they did speak English, but they were happy with my shitty Italian. And I was really, really proud of like just trying and ordering and like talking to them. And they were so friendly here. And we ate Italian food a ton because it was really, really good. So.
Well, I don't know your experience like with the local culture, but I would say that Tuscany usually they tend to be quite a little bit more
snotty.
Posh. It's not, yeah, exactly.
Oh,
well, probably in Campania.
Yes, the Florentines especially
probably in Campania,
are the worst.
people are more, I would say, probably in Campania they're a little bit more friendly. So, well, at least in my experience, I'm from the north, but I would say the people, like I've got plenty of friends from around Naples and they are really friendly around there. So yeah, I would say, I'm assuming that you probably had a better time there.
I did and I didn't. So there, almost no one spoke English, which was fine with me because even though I don't speak Italian, I understand it. But they also sort of treated me like an outsider. They were not welcoming to my attempts to speak Italian, which was upsetting because I was really I really, really do try. And like I said, when the Italian fails, I can at least resort to Spanish, which is, and this is not within wine, right? Within wine, that's fine. I had an entire, I think you might probably heard me on the podcast. I had an entire visit that was in Italian, and I don't feel like I lost anything by I didn't get 100% of what they said, but I got most of it. And so again, I can understand it, but can't speak. Speaking comes after understanding usually anyway. But here it was really a very different situation where, most of the people actually in the south are from Puglia, and they were very, very friendly. Again, right next to Campania, they were super friendly, and they were happy to speak Italian with me. So interesting, strangers in a strange land are okay, speaking together. Yes, and Michele, you're right. Florentines are notorious for, especially. I mean, everyone in
And
Tuscany.
regarding what you said as well, what you said about feeling out as an outsider and everything, don't think that it's kind of different for us Italians just because even when you come from other region and everything. When you were in Tuscany, I was in Rome with my boyfriend and we were scammed. So despite, there was an Italian there, speaking to everyone, it does not protect you because sadly, part of my culture, it's especially in a city huge like Rome, sadly, it's scamming. So
But they
it
didn't
was a
speak
bit.
English to you, did they?
No, it was all in Italian. That's the thing, so don't think as well that just because you're Italian, you're more protected.
Well,
It just depends on the people
it's
you bump
20
into.
countries, right? It's 20 different countries.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, that's how I always explain it. Yeah.
And
Sure.
I think that's one really very, very interesting. I will say Italy is the only country in Europe that you go to where you feel a very distinct difference when you move from province to province, state to state. You feel like you're in a completely different place, and it's not quite as bad if you go from like Veneto to Alto Adige, although it is different. But once you get from Veneto down to Emilia-Romagna, then you've got central Italy is not the same as northern Italy, and then once you get to the south, it's a completely different thing. Really quite interesting. I've been reading and doing a lot of thinking about. I think I was like really triggered by when Piero Mastrobuonarroti was talking about, well, we were the losers of World War II. And I didn't like that he said that because, there's a hugely complicated story behind that. And not everybody was a fan of Mussolini. He did not live to see the end of that war. Italy switched. It was much more complex. And it's as complex as the 20 different regions that are 20 different countries. So I think that was such I love him. He's a great guy. I consider him to be a new friend, but much more complex than that, a little more nuanced than we fought a war and we lost. I don't know if that's necessary. Do you agree with that? Did you hear him say that?
No, I don't recall that bit, to be honest. No, I did follow like most of the podcasts you did on Italy and all of the podcasts.
I have two more coming.
But I'm usually 2 or 3 weeks behind. Like I'm quite slow at listening, but I do listen to all of them, to be honest.
These are your countrymen. Listen to them. They are Piero is very, very smart. He's an incredibly smart person and will give you. So what will be interesting is if you listen to the podcast with Piero, and then in 2 weeks, I recorded again. I did it last week. I recorded with Antonio Capaldo from Mastrobuonarroti after meeting him and spending a lot of time with him. And he and I are friends now. And I asked him some very, very probing questions. Wow. The difference between the two of them. Woo! Oh my gosh. That's a really, I'll remind everybody to like listen to that.
Right.
Wow. That's incredible.
I did really.
Also, it's going to be incredible is Monday's show for Claudette. You were there with Ava from Ricasoli, who came on as a young winemaker in Tuscany. And you want to talk about truth, a little handful of truth there. Wow. I mean, the things that we talk about are incredible. I think you'll all be really interested to listen to the truthful side of what actually goes on in Tuscany, not just from a terroir perspective, but from a whole other, like, no new thought, no new people, nothing, no innovation really allowed. Really, really interesting. So that'll be an eye opener. And so, yes. So Michele, you should listen to that because those are all your people. Who asked Luisa, how is the food? Okay. So when I came here and went to
Please
Vino
tell me it's good. I hope it's good.
It is, but here's the deal. Okay, so this is what I found. As I just said to Michele, how many Italian restaurants have I been to here? 1 million. How many Indian restaurants have I been to? 1 million. How guilty did I feel about this? Very guilty. I've been to a few Portuguese restaurants, but here is the thing. And this is, I've got to give 100% props to David Wang, who came on the Tuscany trip, and he went on the Piedmont trip, and he and I are friends, you know, from traveling and just keeping in touch. And he texted me and he said, when Judy, his wife, when we were in Portugal, when Judy and I were in Portugal, we did this foodie tour. And one of the things that they said to us about Portugal, which is very different from many other countries, is that these are seafarers and travelers. And when you have a nation of seafarers and travelers, what you have is a lot of different cuisines coming together. So there is a ton of pizza here. There is a ton of Italian cooking here. There's a Mexican food here. There's African food here. There's Indian, right? They owned like 6 Indian colonies. They owned Angola. There's Asian food. So when you think about Portuguese cooking, yes, there is some that is traditional, but what David said to me, Shannon, you're smiling because you're friends with him too, but he really put it in perspective for me and said, look, if you wind up eating food from Italy or from Spain, if you wind up having Mexican food in Portugal, this is not unusual, because in a land where all they ever did was travel and see the world and explore, of course, people will be drawn to this area to set up shop and to do, to set up their own cuisine and make their own mark. So I think that is the lesson that I've learned. Yeah, there's a lot of bacalhau here if you want to go find it, but you can also find spectacular cuisines from all over the world. In this regard, it reminds me of London, right? London, another island country, or, this is not an island country, but London, its best food, the best food in London is Indian food or Italian food or cuisines from elsewhere. No offense, it's not necessarily the food from the place. And I think that once like David sort of freed my mind to think of it that way, I was like, okay, we had some of probably the best Middle Eastern food I've ever had last night. So if you're not afraid to explore and get locked into the idea that there's a Portuguese cuisine and that's what you should eat every night, it's a little more fluid here, and you'll see it as you walk around. You just see restaurants, there's a pizzeria, which drives me a little nuts because they don't spell it like the Italian way. They spell it with an A, pizzeria. But anyway, but if you look around, I mean, that's what's here. They have a lot of hamburgers. They have a lot of other stuff. So I think that, yes, if you can take yourself out of the mindset that you only have to eat Portuguese food, then you will enjoy a lot of really excellent cuisine here. And I think that when I went to Vinho Verde, they were trying so hard to just show Portuguese food that everyone was trying to show Portuguese food. It would have been better if they were just yeah, this is the stuff we eat. And it's from all over the place,
And I think it's part of the appeal with Brits going to Portugal, because as you say, in UK, you're used to having a real diverse range of foods, and you don't necessarily want to take slightly picky children and give them, slightly more eccentric, very specific Portuguese food, which, I'm not being rude there. I'll eat anything that's indigenous to the place. But kids can, they eat pizza, they eat burgers, and if they're done well, so it's going to make the family experience a bit more harmonious.
I think that's true, but I think for grown-ups also, there is, I think there's no shame in understanding that Portugal had a very, very strong Indian tradition. And so the Indian food here is excellent, right? Just as in England. Why wouldn't it be, right? Any place that colonized India is going to have excellent Indian food, and that is no different here than it is in the UK. There is it would be a shame to come here if you ate Indian food and not have it, because the tradition of the colonies is here. So it is not any different than how it would be in the UK. And it would be actually a real kind of shame not to have that Indian food here. I think that also, you know, Portuguese food is, it is a specific type of food. It is incredibly traditional. And there's a lot of fusion cooking here also. So to not take advantage of that, I think is also would be a pity. And I think that the best meals that we've had have been some sort of combination. I have to say the best meals that we have had here are either Indian or Italian, because we have found really authentic. I mean, these are, you know, cooks, chefs from Puglia. We have had people from, we had a woman from Veneto who made like, I mean, she made Neapolitan style pizza. It was insanely good. We've had a lot of really great food here. But again, you can't lock yourself into the idea, whether you have kids or not, that you should only have this one cuisine. It's not like, I wouldn't do that in France either. Think about how many French colonies there are, you know, or were. Italy is really the only place where night after night after night, you would continue to have that cuisine, both because it's delicious, but also because it has enough variation so that you might be able to, within that cuisine, have that. And the Italians didn't colonize. So either you love Italian food or you don't. If you don't love it, you shouldn't go to Italy. If you do love it, you can eat that endlessly, right? There's so many choices. But here, I think the choice is, I think it's very similar to the UK. I think you're right. I think that is a huge appeal here, is that you're used to having great Italian food in the UK. You have great hamburgers in the UK. You have great Indian food in the UK. You know, you can have your fish and chips if you want, you know, you can get that here too. So I think, no, I mean, like if you bring kids who are used to having like, you know, just kind of ordinary food. So I think that's really important. Like, I do think that that's an important thing. And I think that's a great point, is that like people in the UK, why not? Right? Like, why not come here and enjoy the same types of food? You don't feel so like, oh God, I don't know where I'm going. You know, France can be a big, especially if you're a vegetarian, trust me, it can be a very difficult place to eat. Linda, 5-year-old grandson Disney show is over, leaving. Okay, all right. We'll see you next time, Linda. All right. So yeah, I mean, that's pretty much all I have. I will, you guys will hear, we will do a podcast on our sort of reflections on Portuguese wine. I think, you know, it's been very eye-opening for me. I don't know that I need to digest it a little bit more. And I can tell you that we've had both the highs and lows. So is this Italy? No. I mean, like, you're not going to get a constant. The just okay wines in Italy are really still quite spectacular, pretty much. And there's, don't get me wrong, there's tons of trash also. There's tons of trash in France as well. But in general, if you have some sense of what you're doing, you're going to do really well in those countries. Germany, same, you know, it's same type of thing. You know, Austria, same. I think that Spain, and I haven't been to Spain in like 20, 30 years maybe, and I need to make a trip back. Spain probably is similar to Portugal. They're about 10 years ahead, but you could still get a lot of trash wine out of Spain also. We're just fortunate in that we're not going to get it because the importers won't bring it in, you know? So the chances of us getting a trash wine in the US or in the UK, tiny. But getting that trash wine in here, oh my God. I mean, yeah, not good. Not good.
I'm interested to hear what you about your conversation with the guys from Wines of Portugal after that, and maybe you could find some regional people to give you the real scoop.
I will see. I don't know. You know, again, the people in the Vinho Verde region are very like, they all put on this like big dog and pony show. So sometimes it's the producers, the individual producers that you can get truth out of. But
yeah, but it seems like there it's like it's all good. So it's really the rest of the country like that. It is it's the unknown.
it is tough. I don't know. We'll have to, I don't know if hopefully he will get back in touch with me. We've gone back and forth. Didn't get to meet with him, but we shall see. Yeah, it's a curious, this is a real head scratcher for me. I'm going to have to absorb some of this and think about it a little bit before it's not like, and again, this is not a country that I visit frequently. It's not a country that I drink from frequently, but being here, I expected something different than what I got. And I think I thought the overall quality would be a little bit higher, and it's not there. So that's pretty interesting. There you go. Right. All right, friends, I'm going to sign off, head back home on Saturday, and I will report back, but I've got I will do a bunch of posts with like the wines and the pictures of what I tasted, so you can see what I've tasted in case you can get it locally, and give you more information. But thank you for coming.
Thank
Right,
you. Safe travels home.
Thank you.
Bye,
Good night.
everyone.
Bye.
Bye.